Basically, there's a few different ways to go about it. So I would look at like where my competitors were being reviewed. So I'd search their brands. I'd look at like who was reviewing them, and then I'd reach out to those people and see if they're interested in reviewing us. Some of these publications are like advertorials, so you literally just pay them, and they'll
Mhm.
write up on you. So it is. I think in the beginning, it's a little bit of pay to play to get that initial traction.
Hello, podcast friends. Today I'm with Harrison Bevins. Harrison is the founder of Oak and Rove, which is a travel accessory brand. Harrison is, for example, selling a briefcase, also called the Alto briefcase, a travel bag, the Kennedy Weekender, and a Dopp kit. Today, Harrison will be talking about how he started out with his product development, how he brought this product live to the market. For example, he started out with an Indiegogo campaign. Then he also talks in general a little bit about his marketing approach and how he was able to leverage media to get in front of new potential shoppers. But then also throughout the last couple of 2-3 years, where there were struggle in the environment, how he overcame that and what he learned throughout this process. Harrison, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
And thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm also super excited. Before we dig into all those topics that I just listed, can you talk a little bit about yourself? You're living in California. What is your background?
Yeah. So I am currently in Southern California. I'm in a city called Fullerton, which is funny because this is where I was born, but I didn't grow up here. Um, I was actually raised in Utah, a little ski town called Park City. Grew up there. My parents were both entrepreneurs, but different industry. They had started a restaurant business.
Hmm.
So I think growing up, always had that kind of entrepreneurial mindset. Always kind of wanted to do my own thing, but my parents very much put us on the traditional path of like go to school and get a degree, go get a nice job,
Yeah.
and so that was the route that I originally took. Got a degree in finance,
Hmm.
and then went straight into the workforce as a financial analyst. So I moved to New York and was basically, just doing kind of what everybody thinks is the normal thing to do. Just working a normal 9 to 5. Well, in finance, it's more like a 8 to 8 or a 8 to 10.
Yeah. Right.
Crazy hours.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, I eventually hit my breaking point, and realized that I didn't want to work in an office for the rest of my life. I
Okay.
could see the people in front of me, like older than me, doing the same thing, and I was like, in 10 years, I don't want to be that guy. Like, I got to do something else. And also, I was motivated by money. Like, you think about people who are very wealthy, and a lot of times the way that they're achieving that wealth is through like building their own businesses, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and so I just realized like, okay, climbing this corporate ladder, like it's just not going to happen as fast as I want it to. So I might as well take things into my own hands. And yeah, I reached my breaking point in New York after a little over a year, so not too long, but
Wow. Early.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like, I think it became apparent that it wasn't for me. Quit my job, bought a one-way ticket to China, and that's kind of where everything started.
Okay. Why China?
Yeah,
From New York to China, that's quite a change in environment. So why did you go there?
yeah. It's funny because when I was doing internships back in college, my mind was already like somewhere else. Like I think I already
Hmm.
knew early on, like I really didn't like being in an office, and I was at work. I was like looking up how to make money in travel. That was kind of like such a strong motivating factor for me. And I found that people were teaching English in Asia, like Thailand or China. And then I
Hmm.
stumbled across these guys that were building a community called Enter China, and
Hmm.
they were two young guys, and they had moved to China, Guangzhou specifically, back in 2012, and they were getting involved in business and starting their own companies. And I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. Like these guys are just, they didn't have a plan either. Like they just went out there, kind of just like dove right in and started figuring stuff out. And they got
Yeah.
involved in product development, and then they got involved in like Kickstarter and learning how that worked.
Yeah.
And so following their journey, like I had been kind of following them. And then by the time I was ready to quit my job, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to China and do exactly what those guys are doing.
Makes sense. So
So
those
that was
guys
it.
were like a big inspiration source to you, basically. You also just mentioned they were doing similar stuff that what you're doing right now. They were also busy around product development. So I guess
Mhm.
yeah, having this community there and having those people there, they were like a great inspiration to get you into. So how did your process look like while you were in China, hustling on the side and teaching English jobs? How
Yeah.
did you create ideas for your own business throughout this period?
Yeah. I think I'm a very like, um, I'm the type of person that like, I don't think I'm like necessarily great at ideas, but like I'm good at doing, I'm good at like executing. So it's like,
Yeah.
if I have the process to follow, like I'm going to do that thing until it starts working. And I won't give up until it starts working. So I was like kind of like grasping at different
Mhm.
things to see what would work. I got turned on to online marketing, so I was learning about copywriting because some of the guys that I was living with, that's what they were doing.
Mhm.
And then I started getting paid for it. So I was on Upwork and I was doing copywriting gigs and learning about like just online marketing in general. And one day I Googled like how to make money with Facebook or something like that because I just
Yeah.
heard it was like this abstract concept. I was like, people are making money with Facebook, but how? And then I came across drop shipping and e-commerce, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And it kind of checked all the boxes in terms of what I was looking for. It was like
Mhm.
you have this thing that you can build, and it can make money, and you're not trading your time for that money. Because
Right.
copywriting, you have to sit down, you have to type and think, and you know you're not getting
Mhm.
paid until like you finish the thing. Whereas e-commerce, you put the time up, you put the time in, you build the asset, and then you can go to bed and you wake up to sales. So it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
winner winner chicken dinner. I was like hooked. Um, so I built my first store, did that for it took like 3 weeks to like figure everything out and like get the ads running and everything, and nothing worked. So I was like, damn.
A typical story. Yeah.
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 Uh, but I didn't give up. I went back to the drawing board, picked a new niche, got better at ads, and then that store started to work. Started getting sales
Okay.
consistently. Started making profit consistently. Um, yeah, and at that point, I was like, okay, e-commerce is my thing. Whatever the business is going to be, it's going to be e-commerce related
Yeah.
because I just really enjoyed the process of it. Um, yeah, and then it was basically that drop shipping store kind of led me into that journey.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks for elaborating on all of that. So once you put your foot into the entrepreneur space, you were trying things out, things were not working, so you had to adjust, adapt, learn more, try out more, test more, and
Yeah,
finally some things were working. Um, what was the next step into Oak and Rove? How did you get started? How did you identify a need and why this brand? How did you start your current Oak and Rove brand?
yeah. So I guess just like a little backup. So I went from the drop shipping business to a private label Amazon business,
Hmm.
and at that point, I felt like I feel like both those business models they're good for different experiences. Like drop shipping, really great for learning how to do Facebook advertising and learn about that world and like Shopify.
Hmm.
Amazon is great to learn about logistics and working directly with factories and like figuring out how to like custom make products and make tweaks and things like that. So I
Hmm.
kind of took both of those things and put them together. And I realized also in those experiences that I didn't really enjoy selling stuff that I didn't care about, which is what I was doing. I was making money, but I was selling stuff that I didn't really have any personal like
Yeah.
attachment to, no fulfillment out of that. So after I had sold both businesses, I was like, the next step is to build like a legitimate brand, something that I can enjoy building, something that will be fulfilling, and then something that also has much more potential for higher exit value.
Mhm.
Um, and typically with a brand with like strong customer base, you're going to get a higher multiple. Like an investor is going to be more willing to pay more for that type of business.
Yeah, correct.
So these are all things that I was thinking about, and then it came down to what will I be passionate about building? Like what's something that I enjoy? I love traveling. I'm meeting all these business people and entrepreneurs out here. So how can I build something that is going to satisfy all these requirements? And I landed on like a functional weekender bag is like a first product,
Yeah.
and that kind of all the previous experiences mixed with like some of my personal desires kind of led to creating the first product for Oak and Rove.
Yeah. Since yeah, you based this product on your personal desires, what would you say is the ideal customer market for those travel bags?
Yeah,
Um, is it are those entrepreneurs, or how would you define that?
yeah, it's kind of shifted over time, just like I think naturally any brand does. It very much started off like I want to go after like young entrepreneur hustler
Yeah.
types like myself, and then after we started testing, we got feedback, we learned who was like engaging with us, and it's very
Mhm.
much so shifted to like business professional. So like managers, executives,
Mhm.
still a lot of founders, but I don't think not as many like young people like me. It's more, I would say it's more of like an older type, so like 35 plus, mostly like
Mhm.
I'd say mostly like 45 to 60. um, that's kind of like our core target demographic.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what makes your products for this target demographic so appealing? Like, how do you try to innovate and to stay out? What is your unique selling proposition? What was your thinking about that when you started out with your product, so that you can differentiate yourself from all the other brands that are out there?
Yeah. So for me, like a big thing came back down to just like being useful, like actually being functional. Um, you know, a lot of travel bags, the nice ones are just fully
Mhm.
leather, right? They're super heavy. They have barely any functionality. It's usually just like a big leather duffel bag. Like you think about like a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. It's like super luxurious, nice, of
Mhm.
course, but it literally can't do anything except for you throw clothes in it. Um,
Yeah, right.
you're basically just buying it because of the brand, which is fine. But I wanted to provide something that, again, that I would use and find a lot of utility. So having like a place for my shoes in a separate compartment, having a place for my laptop that's in a separate compartment, and then like separate pockets where I could organize cords and chargers. Just really thinking about how
Mhm.
people travel, but then on the outside having it be something that's actually quite luxurious. So using full
Mhm.
grain leather, very high quality water resistant nylon, premium zippers.
Mhm.
So combining the best of both worlds, something that's highly functional but also extremely nice. You take it out of the package and you're like, damn, this thing is like pretty
Yeah.
legit. It's pretty awesome. It feels nice, smells nice, looks good. So when you're carrying, when you're walking around with it, you feel like you feel like a boss. You're like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a businessman. I feel like one. That's what it should be like.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't own one at this stage, but I
I'll
saw
send you
the
one.
videos, and I saw the marketing material, and I just also show here your website, oakandrove.com, where people can check out your product if they're curious. It looks pretty amazing, and what I found funny, one of your reviews is literally like someone says, "I feel like James Bond when I wear this." Wear
Yeah,
this bag, and
love that.
that was really stunning. And now I would like to dig into how this process looked like, because to be honest, like here at Wonder Ads, we are very much on the marketing side of things. We run paid advertisements, as you might know, on Google and Facebook. So product development is somewhat far from me, but I'm generally very, very curious to learn more about this process. So here, you already mentioned about customer feedback, and I know from the talks with you beforehand that you worked with different designers. And here, my question to you would be: you started out with an idea. How did you take this idea and put it into market,
Yeah.
or turn it into
Um,
the market? Hmm.
yeah, it was definitely an interesting journey. So it started off with a concept to just create something like I just told you, like functional, premium. And then it really is a process of like refinement. So I did a lot of research. I went on to Amazon.com. I went on the Kickstarter. I was looking at like what else is out there, reading negative comments and basically documenting all of this stuff. So putting it all together and seeing like what people complained about the most.
Yeah.
And then I hired a designer, and basically a designer is going to ask for a brief. Like they're going to ask like, basically an outline of what you're going for, because
Yeah.
I'm not an artist. I'm not a technical designer. Like I can't draw these things out. So I put everything on the paper in terms of like what I want the bag to have, kind of the feel I'm going for. We even
Mhm.
created mood boards. So this is great with Pinterest. Like you can create these boards that have basically different images that put together a mood. So we put all this stuff together. He comes back with these various concepts, and I say I like that one. I don't like that one. I like this one, but let's change this. And it's literally just like that
Mhm.
ongoing back and forth until you come to something that's like, you know, we both agree it looks good, it's functional, it's
Yeah.
different, unique. And then from there, we got them we got them made into 3D renderings, like photorealistic renderings, right? So
Mhm.
instead of just a sketch, it's like a actual product image that looks real, like you could touch it. But it's just computer generated image. And then from
Okay.
there, it was this is where like we start testing, right? So we set up a landing page, we wrote some copy, we had an incentive for people to put in their email, and then we created an email sequence, like a 7-day autoresponder.
Mhm.
And the whole point was just to drive traffic and see if people would sign up and start
Okay.
getting feedback. That was kind of like the beginning of the testing phase.
So that's basically you built a small MVP without having the final product actually ready. But this landing page is just that you can test out very quickly different concepts, right?
Mhm.
Um, what would happen to the people if they sign up? Do they actually place an order, or how does it work there?
At this stage, no, they're just putting in their email, so
Okay.
it's really no loss to them. Um, yeah, I mean, you would lose money on the Facebook ads if you ended up not doing anything, but in the end, you're not really
Mhm.
losing anything because you're buying the data and the information. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah,
And okay, so your background was in finance. Do you have any? Are you? Would you say you're creative yourself, or when you hired the designer, did he basically handhold you throughout this process then, and he suggested the steps? Um, how was that?
yeah. No, I'm definitely a creative individual. Always have been, although in a different way. So like, I'm not a good artist. Like I can't draw. I'm not good at
Okay.
drawing things, but I have an eye for design and
Hmm.
an eye for like aesthetics. Like if something looks good, I can say that it looks good. I know it looks good. The composition and things like that. So with the designer, it was more about letting him have creative control over, like basically taking what I had written down, translating
Hmm.
it into a visual image, and then me going back and forth with him, telling him we need to tweak this or we should change this or make this bigger, make this smaller. So it's
Yeah.
like once the thing is there, I'm very good at like tweaking it how I want it, but I can't like create it from scratch. So that's where I need, the collaboration is really important there.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and this is how I think you came up pretty much with your first version after testing those MVPs, right? So you had
Yeah.
this one version or this one variant that worked the best. What did you do next after you had that dialed in and the market kind of approved the right version from you? What were the next steps here?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, like we're working towards doing a crowdfunding campaign. So that was
Hmm.
kind of like, in the context of everything, we're building this email list because we want people to sign up to back a future crowdfunding campaign that we're going to do. So after we've kind of nailed down details, what people like, what people don't like, at that point, we basically started working with a factory to get a prototype made.
Yeah.
And then once they, the prototype's never going to come out like perfect the first time. So I think there was 2 rounds. The second round, we got to something that we could use for the photo shoot. And then we basically went full steam ahead and towards preparing for the crowdfunding campaign at that point. So we,
Makes sense.
continued to build the email list. We cranked up the ads, um, started, just really, really growing that big, and then making sure that everything else was lining up for the launch.
Yeah. The crowdfunding, by the way, it was the one on Indiegogo, correct?
Yeah. Mhm.
And what was your primary goal? Because I know people have different goals. Crowdfunding is obviously one reason, but was that your primary goal to crowdfund this product, or did you have also other goals when going to Indiegogo? And also, what I'm curious about is why Indiegogo and not Kickstarter, or did you also do Kickstarter?
Yeah. So initial goal was always to raise money through crowdfunding to help
Hmm.
with the production, and then I did consider between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and I think I chose Indiegogo because it seemed more consumer product focused. So
Yeah.
less so like games and tech, more so products that just fit better on that platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you raised a bit of money there. So would you say overall, yeah, it was a good experience going through that? And yeah, what did you do after you received those funds, basically?
Yeah, it was a good experience. Obviously learned a lot. I wish we would have raised more money.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of things that I could have done different or better that would have resulted in a higher fundraise. But basically, once that money came in, we just went straight towards production.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you moved basically from that point to Shopify and sold the product on that platform, or how was that?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. So we started building the Shopify store, which was simple because it was one product. So we got that up, and then
Hmm.
product got produced. We had a fulfillment center that we were working with in China, and then those got fulfilled, and then we basically just started selling through our store as normal.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes total sense. Um, and then, yeah, and then your journey began. The product was designed, the product was tested and approved by the market. You raised your funds, and then you brought it to the market. And
Hmm.
what happened next? You said, yeah, in terms of timing, it might not be the best timing, and you had quite some challenges that you had to come through. And I'm very curious because that's so typical for this entrepreneurial journey, especially in e-commerce, that we hit so many obstacles. So what were your learnings, and how did you adopt your mindset throughout this journey?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few different things that happen. So for one, like it's a very interesting thing because the timing, it had to happen when it happened,
Mhm.
because right after that, the pandemic basically started to take place. But at the same time, it's like we could have had a much better campaign if we didn't rush into it, which is interesting if you get what I'm trying to say here. It's like if we waited longer, we would have had a better campaign. But if we also waited longer, it would have been worse because the pandemic was basically happening at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like the perfect worst time that it could have happened. um,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, it was definitely a struggle to. get through the last few years because of restrictions, and obviously we're selling a travel related product,
Yeah.
and travel demand basically evaporated overnight. But I felt confident with like when you're selling a product for the first time like that, it's brand new, you don't know how people are going to respond. But like we immediately started getting like just really great feedback. The customers loved it. They're like it
Nice.
was
Amazing.
unanimously positive, and that was so important because at that point I didn't know what we were going to do, but that reassured me that we were doing something that was pretty cool here. There's people that liked
Mhm.
it, and that pushed me to keep going and basically just not give up and throw in the towel. So just kept on moving forward.
Yeah, that's good to hear, and yeah, glad to hear that also things are getting easier. Later, I will ask you what your next steps are, but right now, I'm also curious to learn in terms of marketing. What were what was your strategy here to get this brand going? What tactics did you implement in order to kind of thrive and survive throughout this time? And what are your ideas here?
Um, so just to clarify, like post launch of the crowdfunding, or like
Post launch to get things going,
mm,
and then we can also talk about your next steps. But yeah, primarily throughout the last couple of years after you put your brand from Indiegogo to Shopify, what did you do there to thrive as your own brand? Because you mentioned you did Facebook before, so for your drop shipping stores. On
mm,
Amazon itself, the ecosystem, as we know, is different. It's all a closed circle there.
right.
So now you have your own brand. The first time that you put out into the world, what marketing did you use to get it going?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Facebook is like number one. That's like what I have experience with, and that was kind of like the first go to get the word out. But also when you're starting a brand, especially a premium brand where you're charging people, several $100s for one product,
Yeah.
social proof is incredibly important. So getting reviews and press and like even small websites that would write up a little review on us, like trying to do anything I could to get our name out there was definitely a priority.
Hmm.
Also, that helps with Google ranking. So anytime somebody searched us, because we're a no-name brand, so it's like even if they saw our ad and they go and Google us, if there's nothing online about us, the chances of them converting is really not great. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like attacking it from all sides, like with with Facebook being like the main driver of traffic, and
Hmm.
then having those other assets outside for social proof. We also
Hmm.
could use those in our ads as well. And then of course email marketing, because we had built we built a huge list. So continually sending out emails and different offers and keeping people engaged that way. Google ads we have tried here and there. That's been a bit more of a challenge for us, especially just with how things are. But
Hmm.
we are getting back into that. And
Okay.
then what else here? A little bit of influencers, and most recently, like trying to get more people to do YouTube video reviews, because we found that that's actually pretty cool. Because a lot of these guys will go and they'll search you up on YouTube before anything.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
YouTube video reviews. So you contact basically some YouTubers to get like an unboxing video, or how does this work?
Pretty much, yeah. We've had people reach out to us, and then I'll do searches and look for people that look like they're a good fit.
Yeah.
Send them a bag, and then ask them for a review, and then they basically just they create some content for us, and it works
Yeah.
out pretty well.
That's amazing. I'm also
Yeah,
curious what you said at the beginning. You were basically like a no name brand, and it was so important to get social proof out. But at the beginning, it's more like a chicken and an egg problem, right? No one knows your brand, so you how did you get those initial social proof out there? What was your tactic to get those
yeah.
reviews coming in?
Basically, there's a few different ways to go about it. So I would look at like where my competitors were being reviewed. So I'd search I'd search their brands. I'd look at like who was reviewing them, and then I'd reach out to those people and see if they're interested in reviewing us. Some of these publications are like advertorials, so you literally just pay them, and they'll
Mhm.
write up on you. So it is, I think, in the beginning, it's a little bit of pay to play to get that initial traction, and then of course there's the earned media route, which can also be very expensive, where you pay a PR company, and they'll basically
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
constantly pitching you to various outlets and publications and newspapers, and then they'll do write-ups on you. We haven't done that yet because I feel like I was still not quite there yet, because that can be an expensive monthly retainer. But
Okay.
yeah, could be paying for it, or just like looking up your competition and
Yeah.
reaching out to the same people that have written up on your competitors.
I'm just making a guess here. The most time you just pay by product, so you basically swap a product for a review, or would you say not? You have a high price point product, so I'm not exactly sure how that works. Would they take the product, or you pay them an amount, or is it just different each time?
Yeah, every guy's different. Really depends on their blog size or their website, how much traffic they get. Some guys are
Mhm.
happy to just take a product and do a review in exchange. Some of the bigger ones, they're going to want some type of fee upfront.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. Totally. Okay. And one thing that you said, I also want to get a little bit, dig a little bit deeper here. You said you had like a very big email list quite early on, right? How did you get that email list? Is that from Indiegogo, or did you run some other campaigns in order to get those leads on your email list?
Yeah, we built the email list prior to the crowdfunding campaign, so that was all
Ah,
paid
okay.
paid traffic that we paid for them essentially. So through that pre-launch list building strategy that we
Yeah.
did before the crowdfunding campaign.
May I ask you what was the offer there in this pre-campaign list
Yeah, it was super
for them
simple.
to okay.
Yeah, it's typically we did like a gift card, so it's like you get a $50 gift card towards the launch, and all you have to do is like enter in your email to get this gift
Ah,
card
okay.
and obviously the product is the most. They see the product, they're like, that product looks sick. Oh, $50 gift card.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, sign up for that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then they they get warmed up through the funnel, and some percent of them end up buying.
Yeah, amazing. That's how it goes. Yeah. What
Yeah.
in terms of the brand, what are your next steps here? First of all, the time of crisis is now coming has now come to an end, which is amazing. People start to travel again. How does it impact your brand right now? And what are your next steps here?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really great. Like, things are picking up for us. We're getting more and more traction every month, and the goal is to basically just expand the product line, right? So create more products that are going to be valuable to these business professional types, right? So other small leather goods, leather accessories,
Hmm.
and really just turn it into like a full-fledged brand, right? That's the idea. And then, I mean, even looking further down, like I would love to do retail, so like have our own retail setup
Yeah.
and more wholesale deals as well.
Sounds super exciting. May I know in particular if it's not a spoiler what the next product is, or is this still a secret?
No, not a secret necessarily. So I mean, the cool thing is like all of our products have come from real customer feedback, right? So like
Yeah,
we ask them
yeah,
what they want, they tell us, we design that thing. So that was the same thing with the briefcase that we developed last year. They all said they want a briefcase. That's what we did.
yeah,
Um, the next thing that people have been saying is like some type of tech pack, like a tech bag that you can organize all your tech stuff in, either like a sling or one that you can just carry in your hand. So we're gonna do like some variation of that.
hmm, hmm. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds exciting. And then in from my side of things, one last question in this regard. Also, the next steps in terms of marketing. Yeah, what channels are you looking currently at to expand? How are channels working out, like TikTok or YouTube ads and all of those? What is your consideration here in terms of marketing strategy?
Yeah, well, so Facebook is still, a good source of traffic. However, it's becoming less reliable because of the lack of attribution with the iOS updates. But
Mhm.
as I said before, like we're gonna focus a little bit more on expanding to Google Ads. So putting more money into that, and then yeah, we would also love to start doing some YouTube ads as well down the road.
O- Okay, sweet. Yeah, that makes sense. Now you have mentioned, or thankfully you have told us your entire journey from the beginning, how you were in financials and now you became an entrepreneur. I'm curious because I'm a high believer in self-education, and throughout my own journey, I always look up for certain resources, courses, influencers. What resources can you recommend to the crowd here? What helped you personally to get things going, if you mind sharing?
Yeah, so actually the community that originally inspired me to move out to China is called Enter China. Um, they created an accelerator program, and that's actually what
Hmm.
I joined to help me learn how to build my concept and build a pre-launch list and do a crowdfunding campaign. And
Hmm.
so that community is called EC Accelerate. So they're a great resource. The guys behind it are awesome. They know their stuff, and
Hmm.
that was a huge education for me in terms of learning like all about taking a minimum viable product, testing the market, getting customer feedback, and turning it into an actual brand. Um,
Right.
aside from that, so like after you learn those fundamentals, the D2C newsletter, like the direct to consumer newsletter, is a great one. They're always putting out really good content, and then
Hmm.
podcasts that you know, I usually will listen to a variety of podcasts, like ECommerce Fuel, which I'm pretty sure you've mentioned before. And then like there's other ones that are inspiring, just like how I built this, for example. Um, I think my first million is another good one,
Yeah.
and then the D2C also has a podcast as well.
Nice.
Yeah,
Cool. And yeah, finally, when people want to connect with you, first you joined our mastermind group on Facebook. The link is in the description below. But where can people connect with you if they want to, and also
yeah,
with the brand, of course?
sure. So I would say Instagram is good. You can, our brand is on Oak and Rove. That you just spell it out. That's our handle. My personal Instagram is just Harrison_Bevins or LinkedIn. Yeah, pretty much all over. You
Awesome.
just Google my name.
Yeah, and I will also additionally put them into the description below when you're watching this video on YouTube or in our blog. Harrison, it was really great to have you on the show, sharing all those gold nuggets that you learned throughout this process, from being a finance guy out of New York, transforming into an entrepreneur and founder. So thank you very much for having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Marco. It's been awesome. It's been fun.
Cool.